Hello and welcome back to the Karma Stories podcast. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today I have 5 stories for you from the Malicious Compliance subreddit. The Karma Stories podcast is published to all major podcasting platforms, and you can also read along on YouTube under our @Karma Stories podcast handle. Alright, on to today's stories. Let's jump right in. This story comes to us from Admirable Pause 4774. I said I can't work there. So I'm not sure if this counts as malicious compliance, but I'll post here for now. At my previous job, I worked as a peer trainer. Essentially, I was required to do my assigned job to its full capacity while also teaching everything to the newbies straight off the street. Not only did I agree to do this, I had volunteered for it, so this isn't a story about overwork. I worked in a large room where there were 5 stations of machines all lined up in a row from one wall to the other. All stations do the exact same thing, just with their own bugs and hiccups. One wall wasn't even a wall, but a giant window that looked into the break room. I have major anxiety about being snuck up on or watched without my knowing, enough to cause sudden anxiety attacks that can last for hours or until I can remove myself from the room or building and sleep it off. I hate it, it's super inconvenient. Thankfully, this isn't an issue for the most part because since I know the triggers, I can avoid them or set up precautions, like sitting with my back to a wall. And my coworkers are usually understanding and don't sneak up on me. This window also proves to be a distraction for the trainees because they will try to look for and interact with their friends who are in the break room. I get that the job I was training them for was boring as heck, 12 hours long, and on the night shift, but we were working on large machines that needed to be watched at all times in case they jammed or broke, which was often. Thankfully, my station was the third one away from the window, so I could easily keep everything maintained. The problem was, as it always seems to be in these stories, when a new supervisor moved to our area of the building. He was put in charge of Station 1 and Station 2. I'm assigned to Station 3. And technically speaking, Station 1 was supposed to be the training station. I had previously made a verbal agreement with his predecessor and the training team that I could stay on number 3 because of the previous points. Without asking, or even giving me a heads up, I came back to work from a vacation day to find that I had already been reassigned to Section 1, despite the protests of my coworkers in my absence. Not to be that person, but there was a reason the training team was so willing to bend the rules for me. I was really good at my job. I was the go-to person to ask when something broke, and even maintenance couldn't fix it. I've been told by my own leads that they refused to let me transfer off their team without my insistence. So a sudden and unprompted transfer like this was commonly considered extremely rude and was usually used as a punishment. I figured that, as I had never met this new super before, I would just go talk to him and strike up the same deal as I had with all his predecessors for 4 years. I even had the lead for Station 1 come with me to confirm my case and act as a witness. She knew me well as an operator because I'd come over to help her fix her machines all the time. I quickly realized that he was not going to budge on the transfer. So I told him calmly that I was ready to quit being a trainer that day and to have the extra pay cut off immediately. It's not like I was going to lose my job and the trainer pay was less than $1 more an hour. I was doing this because I wanted to, not because I needed it. He was shocked. We eventually agreed that I'd finish training my current trainee in my area while he looked for someone else, and until my request to quit training made its way to payroll. Cool. Apparently, not cool. He came back 3 days later with no proof or paper, claiming that HR said I have no choice. This bothered me for a few reasons. First, he did not call me into a meeting for this. He, despite many warnings to him about my anxiety triggers, snuck up behind me with a group of supervisors to deliver the order. Second, none of the supervisors with him were actually ones in charge of me in any capacity. My lead, direct supervisor, or any of the training team that I was under were not there. I want to make this clear. This man was not my boss in any way. He was assigned to the training section, yes, but had no authority over the trainers as trainers. So if a trainer was operating on a different section, he had no authority. The third thing that bothered me was that instead of looking for a new person like he promised, he took the time to find a way to force me to do what he wanted. As soon as he and his group appeared out of nowhere to quite literally surround me and block me in, I could already feel that stupid fight or flight kick in. I could barely keep my brain together enough to actually register what they were telling me. I could only agree in hopes that it would get them to leave sooner, hoping that I might be able to calm myself down and get in control again. I really hate causing a scene. When they left, I went to break before I moved to Section 1. Finally, this is where the malicious compliance comes in. Despite my best efforts, I could not calm myself over break. So when I went back and moved to sit beside the giant window, the added anxiety of that hit me pretty hard, just like I had warned. So I decided that since this came with a full and repeated warning from my end, I wasn't going to do anything to mask the anxiety attack this time. I didn't have them often and usually do my best to minimize the burden they cause to the people around me. This results in a few silent tears and lots of fidgeting and a bit of pacing. This time, however, I just let it happen. We're talking rapid, frantic pacing, red-faced, and tears streaming down my cheeks, strained breathing, and digging my nails into my arms and hands. My poor trainee had no idea what was going on, and I was unable to teach her anything because I will go nonverbal when my anxiety acts up, which means I'm completely useless as a trainer. When my coworker got back from his break, a prior trainee of mine and an old sweetheart, he covered me so I could go home. After a few calls and texts to my leads and coworkers, I used up some PTO and didn't come back in until I was no longer officially a trainer and could transfer back to my area. That supervisor was fired a few weeks later due to multiple complaints on top of being caught in the act of effing a coworker inside the building. She got fired too, much to the joy of everyone else. She was a Karen and a suck-up, and yelled at two of my very young and nervous trainees for following orders she didn't understand. Honestly, they're a match made in hell, and I hope they ended up happily together so no one else would have to suffer their attention. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called AppropriateRip9996. It says, let's say you are a manager. You come in and everything works great. You don't need to change anything. You could sit on your hands and get great reviews. Inevitably, the ego takes over. You are in control, must make change. They say that is a bad change. Push it through anyway. You are a leader. It falls apart, people quit, productivity slumps, lawsuits, and you are fired. Again and again, it happens every time. No one sniffs the daisies and recognizes good work that should be supported. No one recognizes the pillars that hold the organization up. They just go in with a chainsaw and rip through every idea that was someone else's and act surprised when things fall apart. OP responded to this one and said, no joke, we had a ton of employees in that area and we'd all been there for a while. It was a well-oiled machine and the people were absolutely wonderful to work with. Does anybody else feel like this story was a potential ADA minefield? OP could have brought up ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act compliance, and they basically would have had to have done what OP wanted. This is just your friendly daily reminder to always know your rights. This story comes to us from Xoj. Only do my own duties? You got it, boss. I used to work in a workshop where sheds were produced for farms and businesses. I was brought on as a general laborer whose tasks were to clean and maintain the yard and workshop, clean and spray steel, and to load up the truck with any completed sheds. When I first joined the company, there were 3 other workers there who had their own jobs to complete. One person's job was to make flashings for the sheds, one person would run the saws and fabricate any plates and cleats needed, and then there was a welder. Slowly but surely, the other workers began to quit due to finding better paying jobs in different companies. And eventually, I was the last worker there who had to run everything by myself, which I had no issue in doing as I prefer to be able to work by myself. So one day I needed welding wire, and normally it would have been the boss's job to go pick up any materials or supplies I needed. On this day, the boss was away delivering a shed, so I went out of my way to go and pick up the welding wire myself so I could get a job finished that was behind schedule. But issues arose when I informed the boss that he needed to pay me back for the wire as I had to pay for it out of pocket. I was told that I shouldn't be doing anything that's not written in my contract and that I won't be getting the money back for the wire as he never agreed to pay for it. So I went back to my original duties that I had when I first joined the company. After a few days of this, he came into the yard screaming at me as there were no sheds being manufactured, and I told him that he better get hiring as I won't be doing anything out of my job's description like he stated for me to do. After 2 weeks of this, he hired a new worker who had no idea how to do anything, and he tried to get me to train him, but I wouldn't as that was going out of my job's description. This went on for about 3 weeks before the company ended up going into liquidation due to the boss failing to file accounts for the past 4 years. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Random Canyon. It says, "Hope you took whatever welding wire that was left home. It belongs to you, not them." Opie responded and said, "Yeah, I took it back since he didn't want to pay for it." Can anybody else picture OP standing there, somebody walking up and going, "Why aren't you welding? The company's out of welding wire. There's a spool of welding wire right there. That belongs to me, not the company." I also want to touch on the fact that OP was made to pay for that stuff up front to bring it back for the company use. That leads me to believe that maybe that supplier wasn't getting paid. The company did go under fairly shortly after this whole situation, so there were probably a bunch of accounts out there that just weren't paid. This story comes to us from Jazzy Share. "If you don't eat the veggies, you don't eat." Okay. Not sure this really counts as malicious compliance, but figured it's at least worth a somewhat horrified laugh. When I was maybe 4, my brother, 6-ish at the time, and I were dropped off at our aunt's house for the weekend. Mom and Dad dropped us off Friday afternoon after lunch, with plans to pick us up Sunday night after dinner and take us straight home to bed. We loved these sleepover weekends because Aunt had game consoles, board games, a massive playground in the condo complex, a huge pool, and best of all, bunk beds. Friday night, my brother and I discovered that Aunt requires her kids, don't remember their ages exactly, but F was probably about 5 years older than me at the time, and M was only a couple years younger than her, to eat a full bowl of veggies before they're allowed the main course. Friday night was a bowl of green beans, unseasoned, bland, steamed, soggy green beans before spaghetti and meatballs and chocolate cake. I hated veggies by themselves and refused to eat the green beans. I refused them at dinner, I refused them at breakfast, I refused them at every single meal all weekend until my parents showed up to pick us up to find me vomiting water because that's all she'd let me have. Now, my parents would often save uneaten, refused veggies and food for the next meal, but if we refused it 2 meals in a row, the next meal would be different. Aunt refusing to feed me over 48 hours was completely unacceptable, and my parents never let us stay at her house without them ever again. Bonus, a few weeks later, my mom made green beans, seasoned well, and mixed in with some rice, peas, and other goodies, and I practically scarfed it down. Mom called Aunt from the kitchen wall phone and told her all you had to do was put them in some darn seasoned rice. I still don't like most veggies by themselves, but there are a few I'll eat alone as long as they're cooked and seasoned well. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Tracy Min OB. It says, "It's not hard to dress up canned green beans. I open a generic can of green beans, pour out half the juice, then cook them in a skillet with butter and garlic salt until the juice is all gone. Yum." Another commenter called Zorg Galactica said, "Even the canned green beans can be tasty if seasoned properly. Plus, boiling veggies is gross. You boil all the flavor out. Roasting is better. If you must boil them, put them in with some bacon or ham, or even use bouillon cubes. Salt, pepper, and garlic are the holy trinity of seasonings. Plain boiled vegetables is just stupid. Nobody liked it back in the day, nobody likes it now, save maybe a few weird people. Plus, kids have different tastes. Don't like broccoli? Try a different vegetable. Can't force kids to like the stuff that you like. Both of these comments are absolutely spot on. Vegetables can be wonderful if prepared correctly. If you just boil all the flavor out of them and turn them into mush, it's no wonder that nobody wants to eat them. Can we quickly touch on this aunt as well, because holy crap, her kids are living horrible lives if they're not allowed to have any food until they finish the vegetables that they were given, even if it's a couple days later. That's not teaching your kids to eat their food, that's child abuse. This story comes to us from the Grandmaster Grizz. I want it like this. I'm the boss, you do it how I say. Sure. Context: I work in flooring installation, commercial mostly, usually carpet or vinyl tiles, have been doing this for 10 years now. I got a work order to do a head office for a large developer. It was carpet tile, but with a pattern, lines, and a border. I started installing, and just as I get the first tiles out after laying the glue, the big boss comes out. He says I'm doing it wrong. I was absolutely stunned. I looked at him, looked back at the tiles I had just put down, looked at him again, and asked, "What? Those numbers on the back of the tile are the sequence order. You need to follow the numbers," he replied. What he is talking about are God knows what. Part numbers, serial numbers, lot numbers, they have nothing to do with installation. So if I actually followed whatever he was saying, it would look like a mess, not the intended pattern. I tried explaining this to him, but he wouldn't have it. He got frustrated and called the head office, who in turn called me and said to just do it how he wants it. So I did. As I'm finishing up, he comes back, takes one look at it, and says, "I don't like it." I smiled and said, "I don't care, that's how you wanted it." Packed my stuff up and left. He didn't say another word to me. Few days later, I hear that he called the head office, asking for someone else to come redo it the way I had originally intended to install it. So the office sent me again, and I got paid to remove the work that I just got paid to install so I can get paid to install it again. Needless to say that he didn't come out to make small talk the second time. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Acidic Watercolor. It says, "Please tell me that he saw it was you that got sent out to fix it." OP said yeah, even though he specifically requested someone else, they told him that I would still be the one coming back. I believe he sent his interns, assistants, secretaries to hover around me with water and refreshments, which was nice, but I would have much preferred he manned up and just apologized. Essentially, this guy had to pay 3 times the labor cost because he didn't understand how you do your job. Where I'm from, we like to call that idiot tax. This story comes to us from a dreamer. Complained to the apartments after I do what you wanted? A few years ago, I was living in an apartment complex on the 3rd story with no balcony. At this point, I'd been living there for almost 4 years. The 3rd story was the only floor that connected to the other half of the building for fire code access to 2 staircases. There are some steps about halfway to the other side that I'd smoke cigarettes sitting on. I'd always take the butts with me and swept every couple of days. I was a good neighbor, no noise, cat sit for the guy across from me, taught the old Russian guy how to use his appliances, helped people move furniture in and out. A new couple moves in. After smoking a cigarette on those stairs in between, new neighbor guy comes to me and says, "Hey, sorry to bother you. Do you mind not smoking here? We can smell it in our apartment." I say, "I'm so sorry. Yeah, no problem. It won't happen again." We both go inside, and that night I walk down to the 1st floor each time I wanted to smoke. The next morning, I get a call from the apartment complex saying they received a complaint that I was smoking on the stairs in the connected walkway. I admit that I did do that and have since started going all the way down to the parking lot. He says, "Oh, you don't have to do that. Any stair landing area is allowed smoking, pretty much anywhere except where you were." Okay, thanks. I started smoking on the stair landing that forced them to walk past me and was closer to their apartment. Speak to me as a person, I walked the 3 flights, complained to the complex after I fixed the problem, not going out of my way anymore. I want to preface my comments by saying that I was a smoker for 17 years, but I quit about 10 years ago now, and it took quitting for me to realize just how stinky what I had been doing was. So in this case, I kind of feel some sympathy for the neighbor that didn't want that coming into their apartment. But on the other hand, another part of me says that OP's doing it outside, and if you don't want that smell coming into your apartment, well, close your window. If you enjoy daily Reddit stories, I encourage you to follow and add us to the favorites on whichever podcasting platform you enjoy the most. And if you're watching and listening on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button and drop a like on the video. It really helps us out. I thank you for watching and listening. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.